Imagine a classroom buzzing with the restless hum of youth, where the air crackles with anticipation and the faint scent of crayons and glue clings to every corner. At Willow Creek Elementary in Asheville, North Carolina, Ms. Harper's fourth grade, room is alive with the chaos of career day a week when the monotony of math drills and spelling lists gives way to a parade of parents, their props in hand like trophies of the grown-up world. The kids sit cross-legged on a worn reading rug, some fidgeting with shoelaces, others beaming as they clutch drawings of firefighters or doctors they hope to be. It's a ritual that breaks the rhythm of the ordinary, a chance for pride to bloom or shrink under the weight of eyes and words. 9-year-old Marcus Tate sits near the front, small for his age but sharp as a whip, his dark eyes wide with a spark that lights up every time he speaks. Today, that spark burns brighter than ever. His dad's turn is coming, and Marcus can hardly sit still. The morning sun streams through the windows, casting long shadows across the rug as Mr. Grayson, a wiry man in his late 30s with a thinning buzz cut and a pressed plaid shirt, stands at the whiteboard, clipboard in hand. "All right, let's go around. Tell us what your parents do," he says, his voice clipped, efficient, a teacher used to steering chaos into order. The kids take turns. Ella's mom is a nurse. Liam's dad drives a truck. Some answers met with nods, others with giggles, a chorus of innocence unfolding. Marcus waits, his sneakers tapping a nervous rhythm, his hands clasped tight as he rehearses the words he's practiced all week. When his turn comes, he sits up straight, his chest puffing out like a bird ready to take flight. "My dad," he says, his voice clear, ringing with pride, "works at NASA." The room freezes for a heartbeat, not the kind of pause born from but the kind that teeters on disbelief. A boy in the back snickers, a quick "yeah, right" whispered under his breath, and a girl near the edge of the rug stifles a giggle, her hand darting to her mouth. But it's Mr. Grayson's reaction that lands like a punch. A low, dismissive chuckle escapes his lips, not loud but sharp, the kind that cuts deeper than a shout. "NASA, huh?" he says, raising his eyebrows, his tone dripping with skepticism, as he tilts his head, peering at Marcus like he's just spun a tale about dragons in the backyard. "That's some imagination, Marcus. Maybe next time we stick to something a little more realistic." The words hang, heavy and cold, and a few more kids laugh, a ripple of mockery threading through the rug. "Realistic," one repeats, soft but stinging, a shared joke Marcus isn't in on. Marcus's breath catches, his wide eyes dropping to the rug, his sneakers stilling as the spark fades from his face. His hands, so animated moments ago, curl into tight fists on his lap, his shoulders slumping as if the air's been sucked out of him. Mr. Grayson doesn't linger. He moves on, calling the next name, his clipboard a shield against the boy he's just diminished, oblivious to the way Marcus's world has shrunk. The teacher's chuckle wasn't cruel, not in the overt way, but casual, thoughtless, a dismissal that stings worse because it's so easy, so quick, like Marcus's truth isn't worth a second thought. The rest of the morning blurs past. Jacob's dad talks about firefighting. Sophie's mom shows bakery cards, but Marcus sits silent, his pride a fragile thing crushed under the weight of that laugh, trying to vanish into the carpet's faded threads. One voice cuts through the haze. Mia, the girl beside him, leans in, her whisper soft but firm. "I believe you," she says, her brown eyes steady, a lifeline in the storm. Marcus doesn't answer, just nods, a tiny flicker of gratitude in his downcast gaze, but it's not enough to pull him back. At lunch, he picks at his sandwich, the usual chatter of boys dancing by the vending machines, a distant hum he doesn't join. He doesn't race to the swings, doesn't laugh. His world's gone quiet, the excitement he'd carried all week collapsing into a hollow ache. It's not just the laugh, not just the doubt, it's the ease of it. How a grown man, a teacher, meant to lift him up, wrote him off without a blink, a wound that festers because it feels so personal, so final. But Mr. Grayson doesn't know, can't know that Marcus wasn't guessing, wasn't dreaming up a story. His dad, Dr. Ethan Tate, is an aerospace engineer at NASA, a man who spent the last year on a lunar mapping project, who wears a badge every day, who's proud of his work. And Marcus is proud too. That truth, though, lies buried under the rubble of a teacher's doubt, waiting for a moment to rise. Step back 3 days before that crushing laugh, into a garage bathed in the soft glow of a single bulb, where the air hums with the scent of motor oil and metal, a quiet sanctuary of tools and dreams. In Marcus Tate's Boise home, the 9-year-old perches on an overturned crate, his small frame dwarfed by shelves of wires and cables, a Capri Sun clutched in one hand as he watches his father, Dr. Ethan Tate, untangle a mess of circuits. Ethan, 38, moves with a mechanic's grace, his dark hands steady, his NASA polo stained with grease, his close-cropped hair catching the light as he works. Marcus's questions spill out like a river, each one a spark of curiosity he can't contain. Wait, so the rover has to wait how long to send a message back to Earth? He asks, his voice high, his eyes wide with wonder. Ethan doesn't look up, his fingers deft as he pulls a wire free. Depends on where the moon's at 5 to 10 seconds, he says, his tone warm, patient, a teacher without the lectern. Marcus's brow furrows, his Capri Sunstraw bobbing as he thinks. So it's like texting with really bad service? Ethan laughs, a deep rolling sound that fills the garage, his eyes crinkling at the corners. Exactly, space has terrible Wi-Fi. Marcus grins, the kind of smile that lights up his whole face, and the moment settles a simple thread in the tapestry of their bond, where science becomes a shared joke, where hard things turn soft under his father's steady hands. These are Marcus's favorite times, not the big speeches or grand lessons, but the quiet ones, where Ethan breaks the universe into pieces a fourth grader can hold, making him feel smart, seen, safe. At bedtime that night, Marcus drags one of Ethan's NASA folders into his room, laying it on his quilt like a treasure map, its glossy pages filled with diagrams and stars. "Can I show them this at school?" he asks, his voice bubbling with excitement, his fingers tracing a rocket's outline. Ethan sits beside him, his frame sinking into the mattress, his dark eyes softening as he glances at the folder. "I don't think I can let classified stuff into show and tell, bud," he says, a teasing lilt in his tone. "Not even one page." Marcus's face falls, but Ethan leans back on one elbow, his voice gentle but firm. "You don't need the folder. All you need's your voice. Tell him what I do, tell him you're proud." Marcus hesitates, his small brow creasing. "What if they don't believe me?" Ethan pauses, his gaze steady. No sugarcoating in his bones, he knows the world too well, knows what it can throw at boys who look like his son. "Then that's their problem, not yours," he says, his voice low, a quiet anchor. "But what if they laugh?" Marcus presses, his eyes searching, a flicker of fear breaking through. Ethan sits up, his hand resting on Marcus's shoulder, his tone a blend of steel and warmth. "If they laugh, you keep your head up. Remember, the truth doesn't need applause. It just needs to be said." Marcus nods, slow and unsure, not fully grasping it, but trusting the weight of his father's words, a promise he clings to like a lifeline. That night, he scribbles notes, orbits, rovers, lunar maps in bubble letters, draws a picture of Ethan holding the moon in one hand, a satellite, in the other his pencil dancing with pride. He practices in the bathroom mirror, pointing like his dad does, tossing in the Wi-Fi joke, his grin wide as he imagines the class's awe. But back in Ms. Harper's room, that pride crumbles under Mr. Grayson's laugh. "NASA, huh? That's some imagination." A sound that echoes through the morning, turning Marcus's excitement into ash. At lunch, he sits alone, his sandwich untouched, the boys' silly dances a blur he doesn't join, the swings a race he doesn't run. He'd ripped up his drawing before recess, crumpled it into his backpack's depths, the joy he'd carried all week collapsing into a quiet ache. It's not just the laugh, it's the ease of it. How a teacher, a man meant to lift him up, dismissed him without a blink. A wound that festers because it's personal, a blow to the truth he'd held so tight. Ethan doesn't know yet his day's been swallowed by meetings, prepping a slideshow for Marcus's class, cartoons of rockets and lunar pics. His favorite slide, a photo of them at NASA's lab, matching badges, matching grins. But at school, Marcus's grin is gone, his pride a fragile thing buried under doubt, waiting for a chance to rise. Picture a classroom where the air feels heavy, thick with the weight of a moment that lingers like a bruise, its echoes clinging to every corner long after the laughter fades. At Willow Creek Elementary in Asheville, North Carolina, the 4th grade, room hums with the subdued buzz of a day trudging forward. The sunlight slanting through the windows, casting long, lazy shadows across the desks and the worn reading rug. 9-year-old Marcus Tate sits at his small desk near the front, his small frame hunched slightly, his dark eyes dulled by a quiet ache that settled deep in his chest. The morning's sting, Mr. Grayson's dismissive chuckle. NASA, huh? That some imagination still burns, a wound festering beneath his olive-green t-shirt, his sneakers no longer tapping with excitement but pressed flat against the tile, as if anchoring him to a world that's shrunk around him. The clock ticks toward noon, its hands crawling with a slowness that mocks Marcus's restless heart. Each second a reminder of the pride he'd carried into the day, now crushed under the weight of doubt. Mr. Grayson stands at the whiteboard, his wiry frame moving through the routine spelling words scribbled in blue marker. Math problems scratched, out with a practiced hand, but his voice feels distant, a drone Marcus barely hears. The teacher glances at him once or twice, a flicker of something crossing his sharp features. Regret, maybe, or unease, but he doesn't pause, doesn't linger. His clipboard a shield as he presses on, pretending the morning's misstep never happened. The other kids chatter through their tasks, their voices a blur of normalcy. Ella giggling over a misspelled word, Liam doodling a truck, but Marcus is an island, his pencil still, his worksheet blank, his thoughts tangled in a knot of hurt and hope. Lunch comes. A brief escape to the cafeteria's clamor, but Marcus barely touches his peanut butter sandwich, the bread dry in his mouth as he sits at the edge of the long table. The boys' usual antics, dances by the vending machine, a race to claim the best swing, unfold around him, their laughter a distant echo he doesn't join. He picks at the crust, his small hands trembling slightly, the crumpled drawing of his dad moon in one hand, satellite in the other still buried in his backpack, a secret he'd torn apart before recess, its jagged edges a mirror to the tear in his pride. Mia, the girl who'd whispered, "I believe you," sits nearby, her brown eyes darting to him with a quiet worry. But he doesn't meet her gaze, his silence a wall he can't climb over. It's not just the laugh, it's the ease of it. How Mr. Grayson, a man meant to lift him up, dismissed his truth with a smirk. A wound that festers because it's personal, a blow to the father he adores. Back in the classroom, the afternoon drags, the routine a slog. Marcus drifts through spelling lists, multiplication drills, the hum of a day that's lost its shine. Mr. Grayson tries to slip into his usual rhythm, his voice clipped as he calls out words, "bridged a candle." But there's a hitch in his tone, a shadow in his glances toward Marcus, who sits still, his pencil tracing idle circles, his spirit dimmed. The other kids notice too, Mia's quiet nudge, a boy's sideways look, but no one speaks. The air thick with an unspoken shift, a weight no one knows how to lift. Career day presentations loom in the final hour, and as 1:30 nears, Mr. Grayson shuffles desks into rows, drags the easel to the front, his movements mechanical, his clipboard a lifeline as he prepares for the parade of parents. Marcus watches, the clock, its hands a lifeline and a torment, his palms sweaty, his knees bouncing beneath the desk, a storm of hope and fear churning in his chest. He'd wanted this day, dreamed of it, his dad's turn a spotlight he'd rehearsed for. Words, like orbit and rovers ready to spill out with pride. But now doubt whispers ugly things. What if he doesn't come? What if Mr. Grayson's right? What if Dad's not who I think? Each thought a dagger twisting deeper, planted by that laugh, that casual, more realistic. He shakes his head, small desperate jerk, trying to knock the fears loose, but they cling heavy and cold. a shadow over the hope he'd carried all week. Ethan doesn't know his day's been swallowed by NASA meetings, prepping a kid-friendly slideshow with rocket cartoons and lunar maps. His favorite slide, a photo of him and Marcus at the lab, matching badges, matching grins. But here, Marcus's grin is gone, his pride a fragile ember flickering in the dark, waiting for a chance to flare. Step into a classroom where the air shifts like a tide turning, where a quiet moment explodes into a revelation that rewrites the day's script. At Willow Creek Elementary in Asheville, North Carolina, the fourth grade room buzzes with the tale. End of career day. The clock ticking toward 1:45 as sunlight slants through the windows, painting the desks in warm gold. 9-year-old Marcus Tate sits at his desk near the front, his small frame taut with a mix of hope and dread, his dark eyes darting to the door every few seconds. His palms are sweaty, his knees bouncing beneath the desk, the crumpled drawing. In his backpack, a silent ache. His dad's turn is next and the morning sting. Mr. Grayson's laugh. NASA, huh? That's some imagination. Still burns. A wound that's dimmed his spark all day. The rug's been rolled back, desks aligned in rows, and the kids chatter, their voices a hum of excitement as parents filter in, props in hand cupcakes, attire. Gage, each greeted with claps and grins. Mr. Grayson stands near the door, clipboard in hand, his wiry frame moving with practiced ease as he waves in the next parent, his plaid shirt crisp despite the day's wear. All right, he says, glancing at his list, his voice clipped. Up next we have... He stops mid-sentence, his words cut off by the door swinging open, a shadow stepping through that freezes the room in its tracks. Dr. Ethan Tate enters, his navy blazer sharp against the classroom's clutter, his white shirt tucked neatly into slacks, the NASA badge clipped below his breast pocket glinting under the fluorescent lights. At 38, he's a man who commands without effort, his close-cropped hair peppered at the temples, his dark eyes scanning the room with a quiet authority, landing on Marcus with a slight, steady nod. Marcus sits up so fast his chair scrapes the tile, his mouth opening but no sound escaping, his breath catching as pride floods back into his chest like a dam breaking. Hello, Ethan says, his voice clear, resonant, filling the space without strain. I'm Dr. Tate. I design spacecraft. The room goes still, not with gasps or whispers, but with a silence so loud it hums, a weight settling over every desk, every pair of eyes. Mr. Grayson blinks, his lips parting as if to speak, but no words come, his clipboard dangling like a prop. He's forgotten how to use. Marcus stares, his wide eyes shining with a mix of disbelief and relief. He'd hoped, prayed, but part of him, poisoned by that morning's doubt, had feared his dad wouldn't come, that Mr. Grayson's smirk was, right, but Ethan's here early, waiting outside, hearing every word, and the truth stands tall, a beacon Marcus clings to as the room shifts around him. Ethan walks to the front, his steps slow, deliberate, a calm that doesn't need to prove itself. He nods to Mr. Grayson, cool, measured, then turns to the class, his presence a quiet storm that commands without shouting. You all learning about jobs today? He asks, his tone warm, inviting. A boy raises his hand, timid. Do you fly rockets? Ethan chuckles, a deep rolling sound that eases the tension. Not quite. I build the systems that let rockets talk to us after they leave Earth. Think of it like giving spacecraft phones. Another hand shoots up, a girl's voice piping. Like space iPhones? Sure, Ethan grins, but with really bad reception. The room laughs, a ripple of delight breaking the silence, and Marcus smiles, small at first, then wide, his fists unclenching as the spark reignites in his chest. He clicks a remote, the whiteboard lighting up with a photo of lunar relays satellites orbiting in the deep dark, and another of him at a control panel, screens glowing with data. This, he explains, his voice steady, is how we stay connected. To machines on the moon, we make sure they can call home. The kids lean in, eyes wide, questions bubbling except Mr. Grayson, who stands off to the side, his clipboard limp, his sharp features softened by a quiet unease. Ethan doesn't make it personal. He doesn't call out the morning's doubt, but just before wrapping up, he pauses, his gaze sweeping the class. I heard someone say earlier that working at NASA might be unrealistic, he says, letting the word hang, heavy and deliberate. He turns to Marcus, his eyes warm. Guess some folks have a different idea of what's real. Marcus beams, his pride aflame no laugh can douse, and the room shifts, smirks fade, eyes widen, a tide turning as truth takes root. Feel the air, shift like a tide pulling back, revealing truths long buried beneath the surface, where silence speaks louder than words, and a classroom becomes a crucible for change. At Willow Creek Elementary in Asheville, North Carolina, the fourth grade room hums with the fading echoes of career day, the late afternoon sun spilling through the windows in a warm golden haze that softens the edges of the desks and the worn reading rug. 9-year-old Marcus Tate sits at his desk near the front, his small frame no longer hunched but steady, his dark eyes bright with a pride that's clawed its way back from the morning's shadow. The sting of Mr. Grayson's laugh, "NASA, huh? That's some imagination," still lingers, a bruise on his spirit, but his father's presence, Dr. Ethan Tate's calm, commanding truth, has swept it aside like a storm clearing the sky. The room feels different now, the chatter subdued, the kids' glances darting to Marcus with a mix of awe and curiosity, their earlier smirks replaced by wide-eyed wonder. Mr. Grayson stands near the whiteboard, his wiry frame stiff beneath his pressed plaid shirt, his clipboard clutched like a lifeline he's not sure how to use. The day's rhythm has slipped from his grasp. Ethan's entrance, his NASA badge gleaming. His quiet, "Guess some folks have a different idea of what's real," has shifted the balance, leaving the teacher adrift in a sea of his own making. He'd waved Ethan out with a clipped, "Thank you, Dr. Tate, that was informative," his voice thinner than usual. But the words fell flat, the room's focus no longer his to command. The kids clapped tentative at first, then stronger. Mia leading with a fierce "told you so," whispered to Marcus, but Mr. Grayson's smile is forced, his sharp features tightening as he tries to move on, calling the next parent with a hesitation. That betrays him. No one cares about tire gauges or cupcakes now. Ethan's shadow looms, a truth too big to ignore. The final presentations drag, a blur of half-heard words and polite nods. But Marcus sits taller, his hands unclenched, his pride, a flame reignited by his father's steady nod. The bell nears and Mr. Grayson dismisses the class, his voice a touch too loud. "All right, pack up," as backpacks zip and chairs scrape, the usual end-of-day chaos spilling into the hall. Marcus lingers, his movements slow, deliberate, his small frame a quiet anchor as the room empties. Mia darts past with a grin, but he stays, waiting, his eyes tracing the desk's scratched surface, his heart still buzzing with the day's turn. Mr. Grayson hovers near the door, his clipboard abandoned, his hands shifting as parents filter out, their chatter a distant hum. Then, as the noise fades, he steps toward Marcus, his boots scuffing the tile, his posture awkward, uncertain. "Hey," he starts, his tone too casual, his hands fidgeting as he stands beside Marcus's desk. "Your dad seems like a pretty smart guy." Marcus looks up, slow and steady, his dark eyes meeting Mr. Grayson's with a clarity that pins him in place. "He is," he says, his voice soft but firm, a quiet strength threading through the words. Mr. Grayson nods, his jaw working, his gaze darting away then back. "I can see that," he says, clearing his throat, his words stumbling. I might have jumped the gun earlier." Marcus doesn't respond, his silence a mirror reflecting the teacher's unease, and Mr. Grayson shifts, his voice softening. "What I mean is sometimes people, teachers, we make mistakes. We don't always see when something comes out wrong." Marcus stares, his small brow creasing, his voice cutting through the apology's haze. "But you laughed," he says, the words landing like a stone, simple and unyielding, a truth Mr. Grayson can't dodge. The teacher's face tightens, a flush creeping up his neck as he nods, slow and heavy. "Yeah," he admits, his voice low, raw. "I did, and I'm sorry for that. It wasn't right. I should have listened." Marcus doesn't nod, doesn't soften the moment he holds his ground, his small frame steady, his pride no longer needing the teacher's grace to stand tall. Mr. Grayson exhales, his hand running through his thinning hair. I hope you'll give me a chance to do better, he says, his tone pleading, a crack in his usual control. Marcus stands, slinging his backpack over one shoulder, his movements slow, deliberate, a boy reclaiming his space. He walks toward the door, then pauses, glancing back over his shoulder, his dark eyes steady. It wasn't your imagination, he says, his voice quiet but piercing. That's really my dad. He steps into the hall, leaving Mr. Grayson alone, one hand still on the empty desk, the other shoved in his pocket, the weight of his words a shadow he can't shake. The classroom empties, but the moment lingers, a crack in the teacher's certainty, a spark in Marcus's soul reignited, a truth too big to bury. Step into a kitchen bathed in the soft glow of dusk, where the air hums with the scent of coffee and the quiet comfort of home. A sanctuary where wounds heal under the steady hands of love. In Marcus Tate's Boise house, the 9-year-old sits at the kitchen table, a bowl of cereal before him, dinner by choice, the spoon stirring slow circles, and the milk as twilight spills through the window, painting the room in hues of orange and pink. His small frame is steady now, his dark eyes brighter than they'd been all day. The morning's ache, Mr. Grayson's laugh, the crumpled drawing easing under the weight of his father's truth. Dr. Ethan Tate leans against the counter, his navy blazer swapped for a faded t-shirt, a chipped mug reading Space Geek cradled in his hands, his dark gaze soft as it rests on his son. The silence between them isn't heavy, it's warm, a shared stillness after a day that's shifted their world. Marcus breaks it, his voice small but steady, his spoon pausing mid-stir. Did you hear him? He asks, his eyes lifting to Ethan's. Mr. Grayson? Ethan raises an eyebrow, sipping his coffee, his tone gentle. Yeah, I heard. Marcus frowns, his small brow creasing, his words spilling out like a dam breaking. When I said you worked at NASA, he laughed like it was a joke. Ethan sets the mug down, his movements slow, deliberate, and crosses to the table, sitting across from Marcus, his broad frame a quiet anchor. Yeah, he says, his voice low, steady. I heard that too. Marcus stirs his cereal again, his spoon clinking softly, his gaze dropping. Why do people do that? Ethan leans in, his dark eyes searching his son's face, his tone a blend of warmth and steel. No sugar coating in his bones, he knows the world too well, knows what it throws at boys who look like Marcus. Sometimes, he says, his voice a quiet rumble. People see the world in a little box, and when something doesn't fit like you, like me, they laugh. It's not always hate, sometimes it's just ignorance, but either way, it's not your job to shrink so they feel better. Marcus's frown deepens, his small hand gripping the spoon tighter. I didn't feel smart anymore, he admits, his voice a whisper, a crack in his pride laid bare. Ethan's jaw tightens, a flicker of pain crossing his steady features, but his voice stays warm, firm. Don't let someone else's doubt erase what you know, he says, leaning closer, his hand resting on the table near Marcus's. You know who you are, you know who I am. That's what matters. Marcus nods just a little, his eyes lifting to meet his father's, a spark flickering back to life. You did good today, Ethan adds, his tone softening, a proud edge threading through. You told the truth. You held your ground, that's brave. Marcus's lips curve, a small smile breaking through the ache, his shoulders easing as the weight lifts, his father's words a balm to a wound he hadn't known how to name. The next morning dawns crisp and clear, the schoolyard alive with the chatter of kids spilling from buses, their voices a chorus of energy as the bell rings. Marcus steps into the classroom, his small frame steady, his backpack slung over one shoulder, his dark eyes bright with a quiet confidence he'd lost the day before. The kids who'd laughed Tommy with his snicker, Grace with her whisper shift in their seats, their glances darting to him with a new curiosity, a boy near the back asking, Hey, has your dad met an astronaut? Another pipes up, Can you bring one of his space things? Marcus doesn't brag, doesn't puff up, he answers simply, Maybe. His voice calm, steady, a strength settling into his bones as he takes his seat. Mia slides in beside him at recess, her grin wide. "They believe you now," she says, her brown eyes sparkling. And Marcus shrugs, his smile faint but real. "They didn't have to," he replies, his tone soft. A truth he's learned from Ethan, his worth doesn't hinge on their nods. Back in the classroom, a folded note waits in his cubby. Slipped there by Mr. Grayson during lunch, a scrawled message on plain paper. "Marcus, I was wrong. You shouldn't have to prove anything. Keep dreaming big, Mr. Grayson." Marcus reads it once, his small fingers tracing the creases, then folds it back, slipping it into his backpack without a word. He doesn't need the apology, not anymore, but it's there, a crack in a wall, a teacher's reckoning he doesn't dwell on. The day unfolds, and Marcus moves through it lighter, his pride no longer a fragile thing but a steady flame, lit by a father's truth and his own quiet courage. Step into a world where the echoes of a single day ripple outward, where a child's quiet courage and a father's steady truth reshape the air with a resonance that lingers long after the bell rings. At Willow Creek Elementary in Asheville, North Carolina, the late afternoon sun dips low, casting a warm golden glow over the schoolyard, its light filtering through the pines to paint the playground in soft shadows. 9-year-old Marcus Tate walks out as the final bell chimes, his small frame steady beneath his backpack, his olive green t-shirt catching the breeze as he steps onto the cracked pavement. His dark eyes shine with a pride that's clawed its way back from the mornings. Doubt Mr. Grayson's laugh. "NASA, huh? That's some imagination." A sting that had dimmed his spark but couldn't douse it. Not after Dr. Ethan Tate's calm, commanding presence swept through the classroom like a tide turning the day around. The schoolyard buzzes with the usual. Chaos, kids racing to buses, laughter spilling into the air, but Marcus moves through it with a quiet grace. His steps firm, his head high, a boy no longer shrinking but standing tall. The memory of Ethan's words, "You told the truth, you held your ground," that's brave, settles over him like a mantle, a shield forged in the kitchen's dusk, where cereal and coffee bridged a wound with wisdom. That night, his father's steady gaze had lifted him, turning the teacher's doubt into a lesson. Don't let someone else's box shrink you. Now, as he walks past the swings where he'd sat silent at lunch, the ache fades, replaced by a strength he feels in his bones, a strength not borrowed from applause or apologies, but built from the truth he'd spoken, a truth Ethan had made undeniable. Back at school, the classroom sits empty, its desks still aligned from career day, the whiteboard a ghost of Ethan's lunar maps, the rug rolled back to mark the days, and Mr. Grayson lingers alone in the staff lounge, his wiry frame slouched over a lukewarm coffee, his plaid shirt wrinkled from a day that's left him adrift. The note he'd slipped into Marcus's cubby, "I was wrong. Keep dreaming big," burns in his mind, a scrawl he'd written in a rush, a crack in his certainty he can't unsee. He'd stood frozen as Ethan left, his clipboard a prop he'd dropped too late, the kid's wide eyes and Marcus's quiet glow a mirror to a mistake he hadn't meant to make. It wasn't just being wrong, it was the ease of it. How he'd laughed, how he'd dismissed a boy's pride without a blink, a boundary he'd drawn that backfired, leaving him to wrestle with a silence heavier than any shout. He doesn't know. Marcus didn't need the note not to feel whole, but it's there. A teacher's reckoning. A lesson he'll carry into the days ahead. At home, the evening unfolds in the Tate kitchen. The air warm with the hum of family, a bowl of cereal sits empty on the table. A chipped, space geek mug cradled in Ethan's hands as he leans against the counter, watching Marcus with a pride that needs no words. The boy's small frame is relaxed now, his dark eyes bright as he swings his legs beneath the chair, the weight of the day lifting with each quiet moment. "They asked about you today," Marcus says, his voice soft but steady. "If you've met astronauts, if you could bring stuff in." Ethan grins, a deep, rolling chuckle breaking the stillness. "What did you say?" "Maybe," Marcus replies, his smile faint but real, a confidence settling into his bones not borrowed from their nods but earned through his own quiet stand. The next morning dawns crisp, the schoolyard alive with kids spilling from buses, their chatter a chorus. Marcus steps into with a steady stride. Tommy, who'd snickered, sidles up. "Your dad's so cool." And Grace, who'd whispered, asks about space tools, her eyes wide. Marcus doesn't puff up, doesn't bask. He answers simply, "He might," his voice calm, a strength that doesn't need their awe to shine. Mia walks beside him at recess, her grin wide. "They believe you now," she says, and he shrugs, his smile small but firm. They didn't have to. It's not their faith he's reclaimed, it's his own. A truth he'd spoken when no one listened. A flame Ethan's presence fanned into a fire no laugh could snuff. The world shifts in small ways. Mr. Grayson's glances soften in the days ahead. His lessons carry a quieter tone, a crack in his old certainty he can't unfeel. Marcus moves through it lighter, his pride no longer fragile but a steady glow. A boy who knows his dad designed spacecraft, who knows he's enough. The truth didn't need permission. It needed Marcus to say it, Ethan to show it. A legacy of courage carved in a child's stand and a father's quiet strength. For Marcus, it's a beginning, a spark to carry forward, a voice that won't shrink again. For Grayson, it's a lesson, a reminder that dreams don't bow to doubt, that a child's truth can shift a room, a heart, a world if you let it stand tall.